there's going to be a point, I feel, where there's like a paradigm shift, where there's so many people who start dying in the U.S. and at a certain point, like there has to be a breaking point for people who are, I don't know, sycophants towards Donald Trump, right? Or like, am I totally off base in thinking this? Like there has to be a certain point where the Americans, even the like the MAGA hat toting people, are like, you know. And maybe Donald Trump is telling us that. Maybe that's why it's like 200,000. We got it. 250 tops. These are the magic numbers. These are the numbers that I know you'll be okay with.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I think that if you're like a really strong MAGA cultist, you've drunk in the Kool-Aid, the only way that I can see those types of individuals actually changing their opinions about this, and Donald Trump specifically, is if they were personally impacted by this in a way that like was undeniable that Donald Trump's incompetence is what caused them direct harm. But even if, let's say, hypothetically speaking, we get that situation where hundreds of thousands of people die, I don't think that the most, hardcore Trump loyalists will leave him. I think that whatever spin the Republican Party and Fox News will come up with will suffice because they're very disciplined. So if they all say something, voters tend to believe it. But what I do think can potentially happen is, and I don't usually say this because I think voters are more inclined to come out and vote for something than vote against someone. But if this really looks catastrophic for Donald Trump and, the Democratic Party or media can directly tie him to this disaster, then I think more voters could show up to vote against Donald Trump, not necessarily, for Joe Biden because they're enthusiastic about Joe Biden. Basically, the way that I see this is Trump's election to lose, and the way that he handles this will kind of indicate what's going to happen because at this point in time, Joe Biden has had a very weak response. So I don't think he's capitalized on this enough. I think he's been terrible. So this really is going to fall on Donald Trump's shoulders. What is he going to do? How is he going to protect everyone? Will his spin be enough? Because we're going to see spin. We're going to see this alternate reality that he's going to pitch to voters. And it's going to be a matter of whether or not they buy that. And whether they do, it's really hard to say at this point in time.
Well, you said it'll happen once it starts affecting everyone. But if it gets to those numbers, everyone's going to have a story at that point, right?
Right. We're all going to be affected. We're all going to know someone who was affected, who had it or who died from it. So at that point, it does become very difficult once this gets real, right? Because when you have that real world effect on you, the spin in cable news and Fox News, it's not going to be persuasive enough, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you know firsthand what's happening, then it doesn't matter what Donald Trump says if he calls, the deaths fake news. Like, this is kind of what we've seen with Medicare for All. The media has tried to convince people that they love their private insurance, but we all deal with private insurance. We all have to argue with them to get them to cover things. So you can't really tell us that we like our private insurance if we all know firsthand how much we hate them. So I'm kind of thinking that the same thing may happen, with Donald Trump and Fox News and the Republicans, to where they try to convince people that it's not that bad or that Donald Trump did a good job. It may not work. It may be too late for them.
Mm-hmm. How far along this process do you think it's going to take before someone like Joe Biden has to start aggressively attacking Trump? Or do you think I'm surprised he hasn't yet? I've read that news article not too long ago about saying he doesn't want to take a negative tone against Donald Trump in this, but I was like, that you're the official opposition. Like that is the one tone you should be taking.
Yeah, I mean, if he doesn't actually step up and take a harsh, decisive tone, I think that's a really bad missed opportunity because Donald Trump has done so many horrible things. He could have done a lot. He could have taken this seriously and mitigated some of the damage. This pandemic was inevitable, I think, but he could have lessened it if he took it seriously, if he wasn't referring to it as a hoax at the beginning. So the fact that Joe Biden is not actually using this to his advantage, not necessarily just for political gain, but I think rightfully, to capitalize on this because Trump is incompetent. I think that's just political malpractice. I can't see why he think that strategy would be conducive to a victory, especially because we already saw the way that type of campaign played out. Hillary Clinton tried to take this high road approach. Michelle Obama famously said, when they go low, we go high. That doesn't work. You're running against Donald Trump. He's ruthless. So you have to hit him back. And really what voters look for at the end of the day is strength. As long as you appear to be strong, then they're going to opt for that, right? So hitting Donald Trump is a way that Joe Biden can display strength and prove to voters that he's the person that they need at this time of crisis. And so far, and he could try to turn this around, he's fumbled. And it's so frustrating to see as someone who like watches politics daily. And, it's frustrating just as a Bernie Sanders supporter because he's not being hard enough on Joe Biden and Joe Biden is not being hard enough on Donald Trump. I think that at this time, you can't play it safe. You can't be nice. People are going to die and you've got to step up. So the fact that Joe Biden is, contemplating this type of strategy, we'll see how long it lasts. I don't think that that's going to work at this stage.
Yeah. How's Bernie looking in New York?
I don't know. I haven't seen polls in New York. I think that he has a chance in New York, but, I think that chance is probably lessening. Any momentum that I've seen him, get, and when I say momentum, I use that word very loosely because, he's gained a little bit in polls, in some national polls, but not enough, and at the rate that he should be. Mm-hmm. So, we may be looking at a situation where we're seeing this runaway effect for Joe Biden, like where everyone is jumping on the bandwagon because momentum is really, it's a powerful force in American politics. It's why, like, when the Democratic base, they get behind someone, they get behind them hard, which is why we saw Bernie Sanders like shoot up in the polls. And now we're seeing Joe Biden shoot up in the polls. So that momentum is so difficult to reverse. And with, the multi-hundred pledge delegate lead that Joe Biden has, it's going to be really, really tough. And the problem that I see with Bernie Sanders is he hasn't really altered his strategy that much. Mm-hmm. He needs to be harder on Joe Biden and explain how he's not the right person, expose his flaws, but he just doesn't want to do that. I think he's just a nice person. He doesn't have it in him. Mm-hmm. But the problem is that if you don't do that, you can't win. And I know that people think that aggression, just raw aggression in and of itself isn't going to win. But again, I think that voters really value strength. And this pandemic is proving you correct. The need for Medicare for all, it's apparent to everyone now. So Bernie needs to actually be aggressive and make his case, but he's not really doing that. So I can't see things changing if he doesn't actually switch up the strategy at least a little bit.
But you said that his policies are and I agree with you on this, that they're more popular than ever with Americans. Why is no one making the connection here? Why, if Medicare for all, and obviously it should be, especially in a time when people need Medicare for all, right? Yeah. Desperately. They're still well, let's accept whatever crumbs Joe Biden's willing to provide us.
Yeah, the only answer that I have to that, and I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think that they're basing all of this on electability because Joe Biden's main pitch to voters since the beginning was you have to vote for him because he's the more electable candidate. Even his wife, Dr. Jill Biden, said, I know that you may like other candidates' healthcare proposals more than Joe's, but if you really want to beat Donald Trump and that's your number one priority, then you've got to go for the person who's the most electable. And so I think that's really what they're doing. I think that voters are making a strategic calculation and they're thinking, yes, I agree more with Bernie's policies, but my goal right now is to beat Donald Trump. So even if you see these really huge, majority of voters saying they support Medicare for all, at least according to exit polls, that's not really affecting the race at the end of the day, because I think they just have bought into this electability argument. And this has been reinforced not just by Joe Biden and the Democratic Party, but mainstream media as well. So you have everyone kind of trying to be like political pundits. And I think even Jake Tapper made this point. Where they're not necessarily voting based on who they like and agree with more. They're voting based on who they think is the most electable. That may not necessarily be the case. I've seen a couple of people on Twitter say that they support Medicare for all, but they're voting for Joe Biden because they think he's the best position to actually get it passed, which makes no sense because he said he'd literally veto it. Yep. But it's the only explanation I got at this point, and I want to know more about it because I think it's fascinating that voters are now knowingly voting against their own self-interest because they think Joe Biden is more electable. It's certainly, depressing to see.
Well, yeah, speaking of which, I was going to ask, what do you think about the mainstream media's kind of, I don't want to say blackout, but complete, I'm trying to think of a friendly professional way of wording this. Let's just say obfuscation of Joe Biden's accusations, or the accusations against him, levied against him.
Yeah, they're even surprising me a little bit, and I shouldn't be surprised. I didn't expect a complete blackout. I expected one or two not articles, but segments in CNN where they just downplay it and dismiss it. But we're not even getting that. And it's honestly, it's depressing. Like, even though it's not super surprising, it still is depressing because at the end of the day, like, it's nice to see how the media treated the Brett Kavanaugh allegations. I think that the coverage of it was warranted. I think they did a good job, but to see that they don't actually really care about Me Too and the fundamentals of this movement and how important it was for women to speak up when men in powerful positions have abused them. It really, it's like mask off. Like, you see that people don't really care about anything. Like, their principles don't matter. They were just saying all of that about Brett Kavanaugh because that was the opposite team and they were trying to score points. But now that it's their team, it doesn't matter. And, we don't necessarily know about these allegations. All that we're asking for is for these claims to be vetted. We need an investigation by the FBI, and we just want, at a minimum, them to handle this responsibly. But the fact that we get a complete blackout, I mean, it shows you, who the media is aligned with. It's the Democratic Party. We have Fox News. They're aligned with Republicans, and we see MSNBC completely in the tank with the Democratic Party, and CNN, for the most part, in bed with the Democratic Party as well. So it's frustrating that, voters are getting this alternate reality, this alternate view of Joe Biden. I think that we should allow them to know. And if they still choose to vote for Joe Biden in spite of knowing this, well, at least they knew, right? Voters should be as informed as they possibly can be when making their decision. But the fact that they're not even getting this really crucial bit of information, it's so frustrating, but I know exactly why they're doing it, because they think this can hurt Joe Biden. So it's depressing.
Do you ever feel sometimes that, I don't like, maybe it's horseshoe theory or something to that effect, but like, we kind of feel like we're on the other side of the aisle now, because like it's the right wingers who are always like, CNN is fake news, MSNBC is fake news, and I've always said, like, I was like, well, no, it's all manufactured, all
Right.
of it, right? That's the way you should be looking at it. Like it is, we say manufacturing consent all the time, but that's kind of the purpose. But now suddenly people on the other side of the aisle are kind of like hitting on a lot of the same points. Like, someone told me the other day, like, you're saying the same thing that a white nationalist, Tucker Carlson, was saying, and I was like, well, I mean, I don't know. Do people levy that at you?
Neera Tanden specifically has accused me of, or she said that I'm proof that horseshoe theory is real.
Oh no!
Before she blocked me, but I mean, like, politics. I'm not gonna say that like the right are allies with us, because they're absolutely our mortal enemies.
Yeah.
But they just see like a political gain, and admittedly, like, the left has a political gain in exposing these allegations as well.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, even if there was no political gain, like, I genuinely don't believe this will affect the outcome of the race. But I will live and die by my principles, even if it might not be politically expedient. And I just want, like, people in media, people in the Democratic Party, leaders, to have a little bit of principles that they adhere to, even when it's inconvenient. And the fact that we don't get that, it really is frustrating. So, I mean, sure, sometimes terrible people can make good points, but I will say that there will be silence about this up until the general election officially kicks off. Mm-hmm. And then we're going to hear about it nonstop, because Republicans are waiting to pounce, because they are very effective at, weaponizing any political issue. Like, they weaponized Benghazi against Hillary Clinton for years, and that was just that was nonsense. Yeah, they still talk about it as if it was a legitimate story. So they can take anything and turn it into a huge national story. Mm-hmm. And they can guilt, like, CNN into covering it just because they seem like they're illegitimate if they don't talk about this big story that Fox News was pushing. So, I mean, it makes me feel uncomfortable that the chuds are also like on the same side with us. But I mean, I'm not going to step away from what I believe in just because horrible people agree with it, because it's convenient for them and us, admittedly. We just have to basically stick to our guns and remain principled. And at the end of the day, that's all you can do. Being principled isn't always the best strategy. I think it leads to us losing. But I mean, if you don't have your principles, then what do you got? What's the point of politics? We fight for what's right. And sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. But as long as we're consistent, I think that's important to me, at least, for what it's worth.
The other question I wanted to ask you about is when it comes to COVID right now and the United States, how much is that going to change both the election and basically just America going forward? I've heard everything from this could be the end of the American empire. Historically, if there's like an enormous loss of workforce combined with everything else that's going to come, the complications, could Donald Trump also potentially move towards more authoritarian strategies, because he is going to probably have to get the military involved eventually if things continue to spiral out of control. I don't know what I mean. Sorry, those are very large scoping questions, but
yeah, it's something I've been thinking about, though. To be honest, I think that regardless of what happens, the executive branch will definitely capitalize on this and get more power. That's what happened after 9/11 with the Patriot Act, the Bush Doctrine. So there's definitely going to be, a little bit of a power grab for Donald Trump. He stacked the courts. So even if he comes up with some weird constitutional power, probably is not going to really be legally challenged. Now, I don't necessarily believe that we'll, devolve into full-blown authoritarianism, but it's just kind of like we'll progress further down that trajectory where we lose democracy, we become more and more illiberal, I mean, there's already I don't know if it was a bill or a proposal that was floated where they wanted to suspend habeas corpus, detain people indefinitely. So, and this isn't necessarily something that's unique to the United States. This happens all over the world whenever there's crises. Leaders capitalize on it, which is why I always say that democracy is very fragile because they don't last forever. In terms of it being the end of the United States, I don't know. There's so much widespread dissatisfaction that it's difficult to
maybe not the end of the United States, but just the end of America as the world's pretty much decided superpower. The one that has the most hegemonic control.
Yeah, I see that as well. I think we've already lost a lot of influence just because we've delegitimized ourselves with our imperialism. But in terms of losing more power, it's really hard. I don't want to make any predictions, but I know that after 9/11, the United States was never the same again, right? We lost a lot of civil liberties. It was a new era in American politics. And I don't know that, the republic can survive another catastrophe like that where we change and we lose more rights and, the country devolves into, a worse situation. So it's really hard to say, but I'm not very optimistic right now currently. I think that the United States will never get back to normal after this, whatever that means. I think we'll get a sense of normalcy once this is over, but not without a heavy cost, that we pay. Now, what that cost is, I don't necessarily know, but it's going to be something that's bad. Whether this is used as an excuse for more imperialism, greater loss of constitutional rights and civil liberties, I don't know, but with the way that the U.S. government just passed this huge corporate bailout to the tune of trillions of dollars, they use this crisis to do that. What else are they going to do? We're not even peaking yet. So it's hard to say what, but all of the scenarios that I think through in my head, they're all negative. There's not a single situation where it's we're going to be better and stronger after this. It's bad.
Not even the idea that potentially this has opened up so many people's eyes to the fact that this is how our current capitalist system works, and that there are better ones. Even if you want to go down the democratic socialist route, wouldn't you prefer Medicare for all? I think there's a certain Pandora's box if they start providing emergency healthcare to Americans, and then on top of that, if you start getting an actual UBI, not a one-time $1,200 check, but an actual UBI to sustain America through the next couple months, if it maybe even to November, if things continue the way they're going, right? And afterwards, will people let that go back in Pandora's box? Because now I kind of enjoy my healthcare and my UBI.
Yeah, that's why I think they don't want to do that, because it's hard to put the cat back in the bag. Once people realize, having free healthcare is kind of lovely. Yeah. Having UBI is really nice. Yeah. They're not going to want to go back to that, and they may actually demand more from government if they show to people that those things are possible. Right? Because we're hit with all of these excuses. How are you going to pay for this? And, you've heard them. Yeah. So if they just show people that it's pretty easy to just pass a bill and give them money in healthcare, they're going to want that. It's easy to get used to that. So, it's why I think they don't want to do that. They'll give us the absolute bare minimum, and it'll be attached to this inherent expectation that we shouldn't expect more of this. and this is just the crumbs that we get, take it or leave it.
But what if there's that kind of cost benefit analysis where all of a sudden there's going to be more people who die because they have to leave their homes because of contact, because coronavirus is just, it is what it is. At a certain point, like we've found out now what happens when the workforce doesn't show up. Like now everyone knows. Like there's no mystery there anymore. Like society shuts down. So is the government going to keep? Like I'm astounded at times just to see what happened in Florida, for example. Like, how could you have waited till today? And it has to be because they keep saying that, like, the governor had meetings with business executives and stuff. Like, there has to be that point, right? Like, what's the cost and loss to the country, the workforce, versus just human death kind of situation?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. And I'll admit there's been like glimmers of hope within me that thought, okay, this is it. Like, how can you still be a capitalist after this? And I think I tweeted that, like, anyone who comes out of the COVID-19 pandemic still as a capitalist, they need to get their heads checked. But at the end of the day, propaganda is very, very strong. And like, I want to see a general strike. I want to see Americans finally rise up, but I just don't see that happening. Once things resume and get back to normal, we still have these distractions. We have Netflix. We can hopefully find jobs again. But the only scenario where I can envision that is if it really remains bad for a long period of time, which may be the case. Because if you lose everything, if you don't have a job, then there's nothing left. If Americans feel like they have nothing left to lose, then what else do they have but their voices, but protesting? So it's hard. I would like to see us come out of this stronger, but I'm just not optimistic because the American electorate, they are easily brainwashed. We have, a very pro-corporate media apparatus. It's just hard to imagine it, but, in the back of my mind, I'm hoping there's like a 1% chance in my head, but 99% chance that it's nothing but bad that comes out of this.
Hey, you. Yes, you. Do you like cozy environments with other wholesome people? Well, then come join the Discord. It's got a whole bunch of stuff to help you with creative endeavors, such as stock footage, royalty-free music, and an amazing community of people looking to help each other out and uplift your content. Join the Discord now by going to weareserfs.com. That's weareserfs.com.
We would like to thank Miranda Marone. You are our monarch, and we thank you for our indentured servitude. We would like to thank our lords, Ricky Pilgrim, I'm Raft, Michaela Schmid, Tomospin, Farrer Tahone. You are all the pillars of our organization. To our Knights of the Square Table, Paul Parafit, Daniel Kahn, Clement Chutskoff, Alan R., Josh Mickelson, and Dr. Zayas, Dr. Zayas, Cooper Pilot, Andrea Lynn Epperly, Dylan Bythe, Terry, Todd Buckingham, and Todd Lajeunesse. And to our merchants, thank you for taking mercy upon us.